So I would like to welcome you and thank you all for attending this courageous leadership event and discussion. I'm Lisa Sisson, the founder of Unearth. I'm joined today by Carolyn Butler Madden, author, speaker, chief purpose activist, and the founder of The Cause Effect. We both truly appreciate you investing the time to join with us today. We do know the importance of this topic. First, though, we would like to show our respect and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, Ku-ring-gai people, and their elders past, present, and emerging. We acknowledge all the traditional owners across our country and their connection to this beautiful land. We would also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal people that are joining us today. So Carol and I are really excited to have you here. And I'll just highlight through the session, if you do have any questions, please feel free just to pop them into the chat, and we will look to either cover them as we're going through the session, or definitely when we open it up to the discussion a little bit later in the session. So today, you are joining us, as I mentioned, on a topic for Carolyn and myself that's really close to our heart. We're talking about having you take the first step to understanding the importance of courageous leadership.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all here. Look, there's little doubt that we are living in times where we desperately need courageous leadership. The age of climate change, a pandemic, wars, a time where economic wealth is just vastly disproportionate and people are falling through the cracks, vulnerable people. So these are times that demand change. Despite this, and with the exception of a few good people who are leading the way, I think we can all agree the fact that we're here is that we're just not seeing courageous leadership at the levels that we need. And we seem to have resigned ourselves to accept the pale imitation of leadership that we have today. Business as usual. And then out of the blue, we see something different. Vladimir Zelensky rides into the public consciousness, and it seems to change everything. Conversations I've been having with people and hearing from people highlight the feeling that I think we all have, that this is the kind of leadership with a capital L, right, that we haven't seen for so long. And it shows us even more what we know intuitively. It shows us what we've been lacking from the leaders, from our own leaders. And now we've seen it. I don't know about you, but I think we feel cheated by what passes off for leadership in our governments and in our organisations and workplaces. This is the kind of leadership that we need if we are to overcome some of the massive societal challenges that we're facing. It's courageous leadership that is desperately needed in our workplaces, in government, in business, in education, through our NGOs. And quite frankly, Lisa and I feel we can't settle for less. The reality is that each of us can and needs to be a courageous leader in our areas of influence.
And as for Carol and I being your hosts today, it could almost start as a bit of a joke, really. What do you get when you cross a chief purpose activist with a risk rebel on the topic of courageous leadership? Well, there are no jokes here, but what you do get is a unique perspective on leadership and our call for courageous leaders to step forward. Carol and I are both accustomed to having being brave enough to have conversations that matter. It's a key part of what we do. And right now, courageous leadership is what we drastically need, as Carolyn mentioned, within government and industry, both locally and across the globe. So who are we? I mentioned I'm Lisa Sisson. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm the founder of the risk consultancy company Unearth, known as a risk rebel. I also provide people with a new perspective on risk, a person-centered approach, because I know that risk starts and ends with people. My mission in life and in business is the same: to create a safer world, one workplace, one community at a time. And I just happen to use risk management to do it. Our philosophy here at Unearth is based on the belief that when people feel safe, they are empowered to give their best efforts without fear of failure. Basically, I see how risk is a pathway to opportunity and transformation. Our discussion today is to learn from experiences and what we are seeing locally and globally. Both understanding the risk and the opportunity, because they are two sides of the same coin. There is no beating up, by the way. This is just learning from all these cases that we can draw upon. We all have a choice of our decisions and our actions, which then lead us on a path. We all have the potential to become leaders. This means we will be judged for what we're doing. So we need to be sure that we are grounded and clear on who we are and what we are being judged on. And one of the more important aspects that I explore when I work with clients or those I support and mentor is literally, in Carolyn's expertise, being purpose.
Thank you, Lisa. And to introduce myself, I'm a purpose activist. Okay, it's led me to write 2 books on the subject, to launch a podcast, and to build a B Corp certified consultancy, The Cause Effect. And we are dedicated to helping leaders uncover and embed meaningful purpose, social purpose, into their organizations in a way that delivers profit through purpose. So my background in marketing as an agency owner, working with big, well-known brands has actually enabled me to use my skills in strategy, creativity, and people management to help leaders navigate their business and their brand's path to purpose. So what is the common ground that brings Lisa and I together? Lisa and I have worked together for almost 2 years now, and we found a meeting of minds. It has led to collaboration and a partnership based on some very clear overlapping principles. So Lisa's philosophy, if you look at the lens on the left, to organizational risk is that risk starts and ends with people. You can have all the best systems and tech in the world, but it's ultimately people who are the greatest risk factor and the greatest asset for opportunity, the other side of the coin. My lens, when I work with clients to help them uncover their organization's higher purpose, is that we always start with who, identifying their people like us, using a Seth Godin phrase. People like us believe things like this. The common beliefs, narrative, and worldview that brings the best of their people together. And when I say people, I mean all stakeholders. I don't just mean employees. I mean customers, partners, suppliers, investors. When you understand who are your people like us, that's where you start to connect to your purpose. This is what underpins your unique organizational identity, and it's what attracts emotionally invested stakeholders to the business and the brand. So if you look at those 2 things, you can see clearly where the overlap is, because when you are able to define your organizational identity, that's the overlap, that's where you're able to activate the full potential of your people. And that's our common ground, activating the full potential of your people. To achieve this takes courageous leadership, because it's about leading new ways of doing things, a new vision for business and for people. So today we're going to open this session by sharing why courageous leadership is needed today. Then we're going to spotlight a couple of examples of what we believe courageous leadership looks like. And just so it's not about the why and the who, we're also touching on how to start within an organization. And finally, but importantly, we'd really like to open up a discussion with you and hear what you think, what challenges you're experiencing, that limit your ability for courageous leadership or for courageous leadership generally to rise in organizations. And perhaps we can start a conversation and together get some answers and have some support to find a pathway forward. So why do we need courageous leadership and why now? Look, the obvious answer, the obvious first answer is society desperately needs it. We are at crisis point for our planet, and our government leaders and many business leaders, as I've said before, continue to put their head in the sand as if we can afford to ignore it. The word unprecedented is a word we're all getting way too familiar with, as in Australia, here we have a front seat to the impacts of climate change. The wealth gap is increasing. We've got vast inequality between wealthy Western nations and many developing nations, but there's also growing inequality within nations where the gap between the wealthy and the disadvantaged is growing. Here in Australia, according to an ACOS report, listen to this, 2020 ACOS report, 3.24 million people in Australia are living in poverty. And that includes 750,000 children in Australia, in a wealthy nation. That's 1 in 8 Australians and 1 in 6 Australian children. We've got mental health issues increasing, homelessness increasing. Women over 50 are the fastest growing cohort of homeless people. Gender inequality still exists in developed Western nations. Forgive me if I laugh, right? We're in the 21st century. We can do better than this, and we have to do better than this. Our economy is supposed to serve the people. Instead, we have become servants of our economy, and it's not serving enough of us. Lisa?
So why else do we need courageous leadership? Following on from what Carolyn mentioned, we are in a time when we need connection and direction within our lives from our workplaces and our government, but they are struggling to provide it. In fact, I hear many people share their frustrations, disappointment, their experiences of poor behaviour and the pressure they are feeling in their workplace. What many of you and your colleagues are feeling has been captured in surveys locally and globally. I'm going to highlight a couple of points from the Gallup 2021 State of the Globe Workplace report for you. For those of you who are not familiar with Gallup, they are a global analytics and advice firm known for their global surveys to help leaders and organisations solve pressing problems. And they do a range of yearly surveys. One just happens to be the State of the Globe Workplace report. I also happen to refer to this Gallup report in a recent interview that I had with the Australian Financial Review, because it was highlighting the fact that 80% of employees are not engaged or are disengaged from their jobs, or worse, they are actively disengaged, which is where we can also see them heading towards that disgruntled territory. So let's just take a moment and think about what that actually means. That's 4 out of 5 people we're talking about. 4 out of 5 of your colleagues or team members, and it extends to your managers. And this is actually supported directly by what I'm hearing as I've been traveling interstate lately, meeting with both government and commercial organisations. So regardless of what sector anyone's in, I'm hearing the same thing, that people are unhappy, they're tired, frustrated, overwhelmed, fatigued, scared, and unsure of the future. In fact, I actually visited with one particular Australian global organisation that I met recently, and they've just completed an internal engagement survey. And a couple of their smaller teams had done okay, but the overall business was incredibly poor in regards to its engagement scores, which is seriously scary when you think they have tens of thousands of people that work within that organisation, both locally and globally. And here's the thing, most executives look at stats from groups like Gallup and others and associate things like disengagement to performance only, which, by the way, is estimated at costing around $8.1 trillion globally, which is around 10.9 trillion Australian, but that's 10% of the global GDP. What many executives don't associate disengagement with is the risk exposure, which is the lens that obviously I view through. And disengagement has such an important statistic, especially for me, because I know that risk starts and ends with people. And yes, flipping the coin, opportunity starts and ends with people. High disengagement in the workforce means that there is high risk to organizations. And can you imagine what it's like for the people working in those workplaces? When employees are disengaged, they are at best satisfied with bare minimum level of productivity and focus, which is why the statistics, as I mentioned, from Gallup are incredibly concerning. When it comes to disengagement, employees, in the context of risk, there's kind of three concerns that I often talk to organizations about. Firstly, one, the lack of attention to detail, the amount of errors that are happening actually creates what we call unintentional insider threats. And unintentional insider threats make up 2/3 of all insider threat incidences. So it's a high volume. Secondly, the lack of attention and the focus means that from an awareness standpoint, people don't even often see risks within the organization, nor do they often see opportunities sometimes too, or don't share them. And that leads on to the third one, which is the low care factor they often have if they do identify a threat or a vulnerability. They see it as someone else's problem. So really disengagement not only increases the risk to an organization, but it's a massively missed opportunity for them. This is why disengagement is so important and why we need to take a person-centered approach to how we actually look at disengagement. And the other thing that I really wanted to highlight, especially in relation to courageous leadership, is that when you look at the correlation between the global pandemic of disengagement and the lack of leadership we're seeing globally, you can't ignore that, right? We have many managers and executives who are executing on plans and managing the day-to-day operations, but they are lacking the leadership skills. I'm going to be so bold in saying that because so many senior executives are good at instructing others, perhaps they've lost the sight of the connection that they need to have with people. And the strain of COVID, I got to say, hasn't helped. As we're seeing, is a lot of fatigue, not only, as I've mentioned, across people, but also in those senior levels of management. So right across all levels of both organizations and government. So many employees tend to be drawn to organizations where they believe there is alignment in values and a sense that they can be heard and can contribute to their workplace, which is what they want, right? It gives employees a deeper reason to show up every day and take pride in their work. One of the things my team and I often hear a lot of, from feedback is when we hear about employees, the way they feel when they're walked away from a conversation with one of their managers or their executives, that they feel like they're being talked at instead of being talked to or communicated with. Many employees do not feel like they have a voice, or if they do, that no one's really listening. And their managers and executives appear to be just going through motions. This is important if leadership is something that is of interest. Just think about that you're going to be having interactions and messaging to a range of people, and think about the importance of how that's going to be interpreted, because people are so different. Also, for you to achieve your mission, your vision, you need the power of people. There is no success without people. You can't achieve anything without people. If you want to establish a connection, to build a pathway to confidence and trust, then areas that are often identified as risk, when explored and understood correctly, can actually be a pathway to opportunity. Just like disengagement is a massive opportunity, if addressed appropriately and we get some courageous leadership, it can become an amazing opportunity.
One before, thanks, Lisa.
That's right. Happy trigger finger.
Double click. So what I want to talk to you about now is trust, and we have a massive trust crisis. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the Edelman Trust Barometer. They've been researching and publishing data on trust for over 20 years. If you haven't seen the latest one, and you can go back to the older copies as well, you can download it for free, and I recommend you do. It tells a really important story that we all need to understand. So I've just pulled out a few select findings from the 2022 report to just show you how bad things are and to highlight the opportunity, I guess. So looking at this slide, government is no longer seen as able to solve societal problems. Only 43% of people, if you look at the chart on the left-hand side, only 43% of people believe that government are able to take a leadership role. I mean, that's insane, really. Business and NGOs are seen as more competent in leadership. And when it comes to getting results, business outperforms all other institutions, with government coming in last at 43%. I mean, this is a tragic indictment on where successive governments have led us. If we go to the next slide, people are worried, okay? In Australia, people are worried. And here are some of the things that are keeping people awake at night. Job loss, hackers and cyber attacks, climate change, losing their freedoms as citizens, and experiencing prejudice or racism. And if you look at the delta figures below, you'll see that's based on last year's, and last year's was, coming off the beginning of the pandemic. So obviously things shot up, but these numbers are still really high, and it shows what people are worried about. If we go to the next slide, thanks, Lisa. We are now facing a cycle of distrust that actually threatens societal stability. And we only have to look across at the US to see what that looks like, right? Government and media have fed a cycle of division and disinformation to serve their own purposes. This is not what I'm saying, this is what people are feeling. This has come out of the data. This results in many of these big challenges, so climate change, job loss, discrimination, income inequality, being left unresolved or under-resolved. So people are now looking towards business and NGOs to come together to take on societal problems, which traditionally has been beyond their remit and potentially beyond their abilities. This next slide shows that people are convinced we're being lied to by societal leaders. Look at those figures and weep, okay? Because they're bad. And if we jump to the next slide, thanks, Lisa. What this is telling us is that we have to restore trust. Restoring trust is key to societal stability. The business societal role is here to stay. People want more business leadership, not less. People want business to step up. We need to demonstrate tangible progress, restore belief in society's ability to build a better future, and show that the system works, that these institutions are there for the right reasons. Leadership must focus on long-term thinking. We've got to move away from this short-termism. Solutions over divisiveness, long-term thinking over short-term gain, and every institution must provide trustworthy information. We need all the major institutions to come together and to work together to rebuild society stability. The bottom line here is that from a business perspective, societal leadership is now considered a core business function. And yet so many business leaders continue to operate as this is not the case, and they can make, occasional forays, right? That's not the case. It is an expectation. And if we go to the next slide, thanks, Lisa. Business doesn't exist in a vacuum. We are facing a paradigm shift. To those people, including business and government leaders, and there are a few of them who say it is not the role of business to get involved in societal issues, that's woke capitalism. We have to let them know that business no longer has a choice in this. Business doesn't exist in a vacuum. We are all part of society. And the simple fact is, inaction is not a rational response to the challenges we're facing. To meet these challenges, we need business working with government, with NGOs and media as well to tackle the big societal problems that we need to solve. It's simple.
So, what courageous leadership looks like. At some point in your life, I'm sure most of you have witnessed a leader that has been courageous, either in your own life, workplace, or perhaps you've heard an example through some kind of media or an event. Their stories catch you and resonate with you at a deep level, and in some instances can literally take your breath away. You tend to find yourself drawn to these people. But before I go on and share a couple of, or before we share a couple of examples, let's take a moment to distinguish the difference between a manager or executive title and a leader, because there's an enormous difference. When you think of an executive, think of the job. Executives are in an official position charged with managing the strategy and day-to-day running of an organization. They make decisions, they implement strategies, they give instructions. Executives are all about execution. Some people believe that once they've achieved an executive role, and basically when they have executive on their business card, that they automatically become a leader by the power of their position, regardless of their actual leadership skills. So I think most of us probably on this call know that's not the case. Leadership is not going through the motions and having engagement that make people feel disingenuous, like they are going through those motions of ticking a box rather than really that genuine engagement, because they're so focused on the execution. And by the way, let's be clear, this is not one brush statement for all managers and executives, because we know there are some great ones out there, but we're all here because we recognize the lack of leadership that's not available to us today. Leadership has nothing to do with the job title. Leadership is the ability to inspire and motivate people and to demonstrate a way forward, one that others want to follow. So think about the leaders that you have seen being courageous. What else do you notice about them? A common theme that I've observed for people who step forward to lead courageously has often been their passion, that inner belief that drives them. It's at the very heart of who they are, that their destination is not even about them. It's a much bigger picture. They are often stepping out of their own comfort zones, and usually they're being incredibly vulnerable. They are the trailblazers that are looking to create a pathway for others to join, whether it's a movement or making some kind of statement. Normally, they are the ones trying to build a better way forward, a better future, providing options or a different perspective. We see examples, starting to step up, especially some of the new leaders that are emerging. And today we've selected a couple of examples that we would like to share with you.
So I want to talk about Paul Polman, and not everybody knows who he is, but I'm a fangirl. I talk about him in my most recent book quite a bit because for me he has shown incredible leadership. So Paul Polman is the former CEO of Unilever. He was CEO between 2009 to 19, and he oversaw and led the development of their strategy, which was called their 10-year strategy, which was called the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And that plan was driven by their purpose that was developed under his leadership, which was and still is to make sustainable living commonplace. Now just pause and think about that for a moment, right? Unilever, one of the biggest packaged goods companies in the world, packaged goods, and their purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. It might seem counterintuitive, but damn, they're well placed to actually lead a movement of change, right? Now, there's a lot I could tell you about this leader. There are plenty of stories that came out of this incredibly ambitious vision, which was underpinned also by hugely ambitious goals, which when they set, they actually set these goals and said, we know we may not be able to achieve them. They're massive. But they actually achieved many of them over 10 years and exceeded them. And even the ones they didn't meet absolutely transformed their business. But there is just one story I want to share with you, which I just think underpins this idea of courageous leadership perfectly. Paul Polman, when he became CEO of Unilever, it was his first gig as a CEO of a publicly listed company. And on his first day as CEO, he announced that under his leadership, Unilever would take a long-term view to value creation. And what that meant, he said, was they were no longer going to be slaves to the short-term market metrics of the past. But he actually said that moving forward, they would no longer be issuing quarterly earnings guidance. And he told investors, if you don't like it, then I respectfully suggest you move your investments elsewhere. How brave was that? I mean, to me, that's like, whoa, that takes huge courage. And he was driven by a vision of the future that he was committed to using his position and Unilever's position and influence to contribute to. That is what courageous leadership is. You know, how uncomfortable and scary would that have been? But he did it, and he took his people with them, and he didn't just do that. He's actually inspired other businesses. I have to add that I listened to a podcast interview, and he did say that he figured by doing it on the first day of the job, he couldn't get the sack. But yeah, I just thought that was a great example to share of courageous leadership.
And I'm going to share a local courageous leader that Carol and I are both familiar with, Zali Steggall. Zali is not just an independent MP for the federal seat of Warringah on the Northern Beaches, which is where Carol and I live, but she's an independent and strong woman. And the reason we're mentioning Zali, by the way, has nothing to do with her politics. It's more about her passion and the willingness to be a voice. So back in 2019, the federal election back then, Zali actually won this seat that was held by the former Prime Minister Tony Abbott. He would have been on that seat for like 25 years. So it highlighted the fact that, you know, the locals here were ready for a fresh perspective and a new voice. Her tagline has actually been "Catch the New Wave," where she speaks passionately about it being time to take advantage of Australia's natural advantages, you know, through clean energy resources, the can-do people that we have, our smart tech. And she's also really, though, known for being an advocate for climate leadership and standing up for honest politics. So all about those ethics. I got to say, she's certainly taken a number of hits over the years, and she's certainly been tested, but it's her ability to stand strong. And it's been actually part of her ability for a long time in her journey. On a side note, if Zali's name sounds familiar, but not in the context of politics, maybe you might remember her from a time where, you know, she was a skier. She's one of Australia's most successful alpine skiers. She won a bronze medal in the slalom in the 1998 Winter Olympic Games, and she's also won a gold medal in the World Championships. So a very skilled person. But what really stands out is this common theme that I've seen with Zali and her commitment to fairness. And it also has, she has served on the Olympic Winter Institute of Australia, and she's been a member of the Australian Sport and Anti-Doping Agency. So she stands up for the things that she really believes in, and that takes courage, especially if you think about the political environment and how vicious that can be. But what does leadership, what does it mean to you and others? So I think I jumped up. So we recently did a poll, and I thank all of you that actually took part in the poll that we ran. It's really, really appreciated. But, you know, we're using the information from the poll, not just for today's event, but we're continuing to capture this information for future work and analysis. So let's take a little look. So the poll was anonymous, which was great. And the first question that we had was courageous leadership. What does it mean to you? Now, I'm hoping you can see the figures in there, and you can look at the top 3 responses that we've got there. But we had a range of responses. But what did come through, kind of loud and clear, was the need for positive change through and beyond organizations, right? And the thing about this change is that people are going to be at the center of the change. And we need to see a change and positive behavior improvements, right? Because they're going to make the difference. Carolyn already spoke about the lack of trust. Leaders need to be worthy of trust. It's not something they can buy, they can talk about and banner for. They have to earn it. And on the second poll that we had, on the second question, this is actually sharing all your voices, was what was leadership lacking today? And so this was free text. And so I wanted to share as many of them as I could. So I've put them on the screen that you can sort of run your eyes through them, because there was an amazing response. And I couldn't put them all up, unfortunately, as much as I would like to. So we'll find another way to share a lot of that sort of input. But you can see that theme that's there, it's similar to what I've just talked about. There's that burning need for change and definitely the need for improved behavior. There is a need for leaders to be bold, courageous, and having our best interests at heart and in their minds, right? We need bigger pictures, big picture. We need the substance. Having leaders step forward that are not just self-serving or worth sabotaging others, that they are actually stretching themselves, showing up authentically with their passion, creativity, and remembering that fun and adventure are actually part of that mix as well. So, how to start? You need to start with having clarity. Many people understand the importance of strong leadership, but I would say when you view through a risk and opportunity lens, then you become acutely aware of the importance for direction and connectedness for success. I don't mean risk management through a tick box approach, but through our people-centered approach and risk and the risk and opportunity lens. Understanding that people are at the center of everything that we do, as people touch every aspect of a business, of an agency, or whatever venture you are on. Remember, risk and opportunity are 2 sides of the same coin. So decisions and actions or inactions can have significant consequences, which is why having clarity is so vital. You need clarity on who you are and the identity of your organization or agency or department. And if you hold an executive role or are seen as a leader, then you are a custodian of that identity. Having clarity to understand how you represent that identity, your alignment to the identity, your motivation, your biases, which, by the way, shouldn't be a dirty word because we all have them, right? But your ethics and integrity are imperative for any leadership role. They influence and form our decision thinking and actions or inactions that you take, which can have consequences, on many, including employees, peers, customers, stakeholders, investors, and the public. And by using a people-centered approach, to like risk and opportunity, it allows you to openly view both sides of those coins and how those decisions and actions affect the people that you are there to support and are responsible for. And this is a huge responsibility. I recognize that having clarity around these 4 pillars is imperative for organizations to manage both their risk and unlock its full potential. I'm sharing this with you because we believe these 4 pillars are essential to any organizations rising to the challenge and meeting the needs of the times we live in today. they need clarity. So let's bring this back to courageous leadership. It is essential for you to have clarity of the purpose, the society change your organization exists to serve, to have the clarity of what integrity means to you and your organization, to have clarity on your approach and decision making and how that translates into action, having clarity to understand both the risk and opportunity, which actually influences your decisions, right? You can take these pillars and you can share them and you can move forward with them. But I've actually stepped up and at a courageous leadership forum, and I've actually developed a clarity workshop where I brought together some of the best experts in their fields to make this an incredibly valuable and unique workshop experience and opportunity. We have Carolyn, who you already know, and is the foremost social. We have Carolyn. She's our foremost social expert. We also have Mark Crosweller, who has worked at many top levels of government and has just completed his PhD on ethical leadership. His research saw him speak to global leaders, both within the public sector as well as in the private. We also have Paul Gordon, an expert in decision making and the author of the book Hard Decisions Made Easy. He is also a creator of a decision thinking model. And rounding out this is obviously yours truly, your risk rebel, showing organizations that risk can be a pathway to opportunity and transformation. These 4 pillars all interweave, which is why the Clarity Workshop is unlike anything else that's available today. So we are going to open up the discussion shortly, but right now, I'm inviting you to channel your courageous leader within you to join me for discussion to explore whether our Clarity Workshop could be the right for your organization. As we go on, I'm going to pop a Calendly link into the chat and would welcome for you guys to have a discussion with us about this. And please know, that this is not necessarily a way you have to move forward. There may be other things that we can do to support you to move forward, because it is really about supporting, right? It's about being in your corner to support you as you're going on your courageous journey.
And every journey is different, right? So, one important thought that we wanted to get out there is that courageous leadership starts within, but you're never out there on your own, okay? When you understand your organizational identity and when you start working with it, you attract people who care about the kind of change that you try to make. They share your values, your vision, your beliefs. That means that, as a leader, you're not alone. You're leading a movement of change and you're using your organization as a vehicle for that. So if you go back to the beginning, you remember when we started with Vladimir Zelensky, that's the type of leadership that we are craving and clearly we need. That's the kind of leadership that inspires the powerful movements of change that the world needs right now. I invite you, Lisa and I invite you, channel your Vladimir Zelensky and think about, what will you do next? And I really encourage you to reach out to Lisa and to have a chat, because I know, Lisa, it will not be a hard sell, but it will be an opportunity to see how she or we can support you on your path. Now, without any further ado, we've talked a lot and we would love to hear from you on what courageous leadership means to you. Why are you here? What brought you here? I'd love to hear from some of you. Unmute yourself and let us know what you're thinking and where you're at. Anyone willing to jump in?
Jasmine.
Hi.
Hey, it's good to see you.
Likewise. I think just something that resonated in what you're saying, particularly around that idea of clarity, is a particular leader I know. He led a volunteer workforce, so they are inherently purpose motive, particularly driven by a sense of service and helping their communities. And what really made him stand out was, integrity was at the forefront of what he did and how he led. Linking into some of the comments in the chats as well, is this sense of consistency breeds trust. And that doesn't mean you can't change your position, but it does say that when you do something that seems contrary to your values or what you say is your driver, there is a need to explain it, not justify. You're a leader, you're a manager, it's your, that's your right. But helping people to stay on a journey where they feel that your values and theirs are aligned, theirs and the organisations are on the same track, and that allows them to continue to feel that sense of purpose that can drive them. And so, when a hard decision needed to be made or something that was going to be unpopular, he never shirked from it, never used, the PR and sound bites, because your people don't need to hear propaganda. We know it. We instinctively fight away from it. And so, working for someone like that, his name is Didier Murtier. He was known as the People's Commissioner. He's now an executive in InterSystems, but truly one of the most courageous, authentic leaders I've ever had the privilege to work for, because all of those elements were there, but also he understood the need to take people on the journey and show that consistency, because if there's a lack of consistency, people go, hang on a sec, that's not what I expect. And so I think that's also when we look at broader institutions like, our governments and so on, why we're feeling this disconnect is we don't know what they stand for anymore. And so we can't trust those institutions. We can't trust those leaders that are sitting in those positions. So I think, from a personal reflection, that element of consistency and communication is key to being a courageous, but also a consistent leader that people feel they can trust and follow, or want to follow.
Yeah.
That's fabulous insight to actually share that too, because it wraps up so many qualities around that connectedness. And you're right. Being consistent. When you start doing things where there's the inconsistency, it really does feel like a roller coaster ride, and it does not help with that trust. Carolyn, I know you wanted to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I'd love to ask you, Jasmine. Clearly, he's inspired you. Are you channeling those characteristics through your own leadership? Are you consciously channeling that?
Yeah, and I think it's, again, when you see it, you can be it. When you see something like that and it resonates so clearly with you, it does drive you to say, hang on, I'm doing something that, again, maybe, unclear to my followers. I need to actually go and have this conversation about why we're having to do this difficult thing, but also to say, this is where we're trying to get to. We're not doing this to be difficult. We're not doing this to be malicious. This is that long-term objective. And I think that is also something that's really missing, again, in our institutions and our organizations, is that long-term focus, because we've seen where short-termism gets us, and none of it's good.
Yeah. And I think those pillars that Lisa shared before, that's the sort of thing that can channel the consistency, but also the authenticity you mentioned. It's not, you're just not showing up every now and again for the odd thing because it feels like the right thing to do. If you are led by a true purpose, a true higher purpose, that's where you're going to be authentic, because you're driven by it. And where you have to actually move away from a consistent position, the authenticity comes through. It's like, no, I know we said we would do this, but we can't at the moment, because you bring people with you, right? Yeah. But having that purpose and having the ethical leadership, the integrity is key to that. I'm going to jump, James.
Morning, ladies. Fantastic session. Thank you. If I'm thinking about the Zelensky effect, and that might be a term that kind of grabs, right? And if I compare his response, and particularly when in the early days he was offered the opportunity to escape, and he said, thanks, but no thanks, I don't need a lift, I need support, or whatever the exact words were. And I contrast that with the response of the then leader of Afghanistan, right, who did a runner, right? He did a bunk.
Yeah.
And so he claims leadership of his nation, of his country. And yes, it's a horrible set of circumstances, but so was Zelensky's. And so what you see in him, and we've all heard this leadership by example phrase, for all of our working lives, but you're really seeing it. And the key thing, I think, with Zelensky as well is, because one of the things about being a courageous leader, often as not, is you can scare the crap out of your people by how courageous you are. Right? Holy crap, we're going where? We're doing what? and I think what Zelensky's been really, really clever at doing is communicating a sense of, and this is a bizarre word to use in the context, but a sense of safety, right? The psychological safety that he just exudes and says, I am a leader that you can trust, and therefore I'm a leader who's worthy of followership, right? And as a consequence, obviously what we're seeing is certainly, around the Western world at least, a whole bunch of us are willing to follow him, even though it's not our nation. So I think that with courageous leadership, what is incumbent upon courageous leaders is to also remember that they've got to create an environment of psychological safety for people just to step into it. Being the courageous leader, over the top, heaps of smoke alone just doesn't work. If you're not creating that safety, then eventually people, and particularly I think in Australia, where we're naturally actually risk averse,
Yes.
we're going to kind of pull back and say, well, hang on, have you thought this through?
Yeah, and that Zelensky example is, and I know you've got a background in the army, haven't you, James? So that's a really interesting perspective from there. But that Zelensky example, like, you ask, how do you create psychological safety when you need change that takes courage? You're stepping into the unknown. But what Zelensky has shown us is, wow, if you can do it, if you can create that in that situation, then you must be able to create it outside of a wartime situation as well.
Absolutely. And I think, probably one of the biggest keys to his success has been the never-ending communication with his people. Communicate. And just in case you didn't understand, I'm going to say it again.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So consistency, authenticity, psychological safety, which is driven by regular and consistent communication. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. Agreed.
Anyone else?
Anybody else who wants to be courageous and come and say something else?
Come on.
Be daring. It's Thursday. Start your Thursday morning the right way.
What's I'd like to ask, do you feel that where you're at in your organizations, do you feel there is the opportunity for courageous leadership? I'd love to hear from anyone on whether they feel that there is the capacity for that, or it just doesn't exist.
I think for our organisation, we're a very small organisation and we started it ourselves. So for us, courageous leadership is actually who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. So we find that part of it easier than some of, I guess, the day-to-day management challenges and motivating people and workforce, that sort of thing. But I think just going back to the broader thing, that leadership's also the responsibility of citizens as well. So we place a lot of power and responsibility on our leaders, but we don't actually step up and hold them to account. Or if they do have an inspiring vision, sometimes they don't get voted for or don't get supported. So I think it's also a responsibility on the non-leaders and the followers to create those courageous leaders and support them when they do step up. And I think, in war times, that's necessary, and in some ways it's forced upon people, but with climate change and all these other societal issues, I think we're also passing the buck a little bit as citizens and expecting leaders to pop out of nowhere to solve all the problems for us. So I think it's incumbent on everyone to do a little bit themselves as well.
Agreed, Dean. And I know that's part of the reason Carol and I want to do this session, is to encourage. It's not just people in official titled roles, it is people stepping forward. And that's what we were saying earlier, that you don't need to have an executive role or a manager role. It's about stepping forward. And so I think you're touching on a really important point. And, just as we're sort of rounding out, actually, I guess this session today, courageous leadership is about people. Either we step forward as leaders or we support those that are stepping forward. We need to come together. We need leaders who are willing to be courageous, and we need them now. The time is now. We need them now more than ever.
Can I just add one quick
yeah.
thing to that, Lisa?
Go for it.
I think that point is absolutely spot on, Dean, and we get the leaders we deserve. You know, so we have to recognize that divisiveness and the division that the media and certain governments are creating, that we're being manipulated through that, and we get the leaders we deserve, whether it's in government or through business or through our workplaces. It is incumbent on us to really lean into our own leadership and recognise that and act accordingly. Sorry, Lisa.
I was going to say, because it goes into something that Carol and I talk about quite a bit, actually, is around the acceptance of poor behaviour. So whether it's at a government level or whether it's in a business, if we continue to accept, poor behaviour of others, then this is the reason we have so many messes everywhere, and we keep seeing that through that acceptance or not sort of battling as the same way we could. Whether it's through voting or whatever it may be, we're seeing that the behaviours got worse and worse. So that degree keeps turning and getting worse and worse, and our situation is getting worse and worse. So we need to really bring in that accountability back in now, because if we don't, it's going to continue to get worse, and it's a long journey bringing it back. So we need to start 1 degree back. So that takes all of us to be courageous and hold people to account, hold ourselves to account to do exactly that. And so, look, there's so much we could go on and share around this, because it is such a good topic, and maybe one day we'll have the opportunity to do one of these actually in person and get a lot of people around the room just talking about it. I think that'd be a nice thing to do. But in the meantime, if you are keen to have a further discussion or even explore something like the Clarity Workshop, and again, there's no pressure with this, but, we are here. I know where Carol and I come from, and it's a genuine desire to help. Right? It's a genuine desire to want to help. So we're here, we're an option, whether it's through something like Clarity or not. There's other means and things. We have a whole network of people that we know too. So we're kind of here to help. But if you do want to, be a part and have a session with us, Carol and I both agree that, we want to help invest in your leadership journey. So we're both willing to put one of our books each in for the people who register with us, for the first kind of 10, happy to do that if that's of interest to anyone. So please, again, there is no pressure, but I'd like to sort of, just as we're closing out, leave you with a quote, because we know that it's only when people feel safe to fail that they truly feel safe to succeed. And so if we're going to ask people to be brave, to be courageous, then we need to be able to support them. And one thing I'll also sort of highlight now is just be honest with yourself on your journey. Listen to your intuition. It will serve you well. And please, by all means, stay in touch with us, share your journey. If we can support in any way, we will. We are looking forward to hopefully having a chance to speak with you again. And I'd like to truly thank you for all of you for investing the time, for contributing in this discussion today, for filling out the survey and everything else that you're doing. It all makes a difference. And knowing that, we're not alone. We are more than just one voice. So coming together. So I really appreciate your time. I hope that you will take the time to speak with us and share your thoughts and even your feedback. But would really like you to please just take care, be safe, and know that we're here in your corner also.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.